You're not answering my question. You're continuing to cite very right-wing Israeli politicians. But what do you think is the reason?
I'm getting there. I'm saying, so I think they disengaged in order to kill the peace process. I think they put the full blockade around the country for the reason that they've always kind of done it there, that, yeah, they don't want too much stuff getting in. They want to keep them, as they put it, on a diet, and they don't want rockets to fly into Israel.
The second one is a kind of important one, isn't it, the final
one
you said?
It is.
If the Palestinian leadership in Gaza after 2005 had not from the get-go decided to use Gaza as a stockpiling place for rockets to fire into Israel, all of it would be different. If they had just resisted the temptation that so many of us do in our lives to stop keeping RPGs in our cellars and then Katyusha rockets in our children's bedrooms, all of it could have been different. If that desire to live in peace beside your neighbors had superseded the desire to stockpile rockets, it would all be different.
Yeah, or if Israel just hadn't occupied them for 60 years, it would all be different too.
I mean,
why is it the onus always on them?
Well, you believe in self-determination, I'm sure. Yes.
I believe in individual rights, yeah, sure.
Okay, individual rights. And that includes the right to make bad decisions. Sure. Yes. The Palestinians in Gaza, when they voted in Hamas, made a very bad decision.
I have to be honest, I was shocked to see Dave Smith debating Douglas Murray. Why? Because Dave Smith talks about things and Douglas Murray talks about things but also visit the country that he's talking about. So it's going to be a very interesting debate.
Yeah, of course,
and
Douglas.
In the years, hang on. And in the years after that, they made bad decision after bad decision. It was a very bad decision to continually fire thousands of rockets into Israel. It was a very bad decision to use what boats came in early on and to use the smuggling networks from Egypt, not to bring in supplies that you could actually build a thriving society with, but to bring in rockets. It was a very bad idea. No, there was not starvation in Gaza after 2005. No, there was no deficit of goods coming in. I've been plenty of times.
There was no deficit?
No, there are plenty.
No goods were kept out.
There are plenty. How many? Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
That is the thing that I don't like about certain people, is when somebody is talking about my island and they know my island better than me because they read something on Wikipedia. And that is what I find suspicious. Somebody that goes on Wikipedia and knows stuff better than the natives or the local or the people that visited the country.
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been?
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? I've never been to. Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you can. But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
no,
okay.
I find that
lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so
if you're going to spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
All right. I just think this is a non-argument.
You don't think?
Okay. No, I think it's a non-argument.
But if you're an expert,
well, you have to go and touch the ground.
No, I think you have to see. I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you spend a career talking about something. Yes, I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
Okay,
it's sort of normal. It's a normal thing to do. You're talking about. Hang on, you're talking about crossing points. And not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
Just think about it. We're not saying that you can talk about it. We're just saying if you build a career as a non-expert, it can be a little frustrating. Adelo, remember to subscribe.
Remember to subscribe? ¿Por qué?
Again, I think this is a non-argument. I don't understand.
No, it's not a non-argument.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a non-argument if you're insisting that you're an expert of some kind, or not claiming you're an expert, but still talking about it, about the provisions going into Gaza or not, if you've never seen any of this going on.
So you're not allowed to speak about things that you've read about. You can only speak about things that you've seen with your own eyes.
You can talk about what you want, as you're proving. But that is a different matter from spending an awfully long amount of time talking about an issue in a region you haven't even had the courtesy to visit whilst developing all of these views about it. I mean, now I slightly get an idea of where you're coming from. You've read about this blockade, and so you imagine that that's what it is. I imagine you've read all the people who say that Gaza was a concentration camp, and you probably think that too. Am I right?
You can see it in his face. He's like being very careful. I don't want to be disrespectful, telling that you don't know what you're talking about. But I really need to know where you know the thing that you really want to talk about and challenge me about. Because it seems like you want to tell me that you know better than me. Well, I have been visiting the place, but you're like, well, I might know better than you maybe. But I'm not the expert.
I mean, again, literally a concentration camp. It shares a lot of similarities, I would think.
Wow. Well, as I say, you can't time travel
Let's go
back to the
back to the
Nazi era.
let's
but
go
you
back to
could
the blockade.
go to the Middle
okay.
East and actually visit it.
Okay,
It's
the
not hard to
World
do.
Bank said in 1996 for the
Now
one
the
year of the
libertarians
blockade.
are quoting the World Bank. I love it.
It doesn't mean anything. This is a non-argument. Yes, I'm saying the World Bank did their own analysis of this, and they said that it was a 40%
your
of the,
own analysis?
Hold on. You got to
Jesus
stop
Christ.
interrupting
Okay.
and let him finish
I
the
will.
sentence.
the
Fire
World
away.
Bank said that 40% drop in the GDP of 1 year due to the blockade. And there's been a blockade from 2007 on. So are you saying that this hasn't had an economic effect? Is that the argument?
No, of course it'll have an economic effect.
So you're saying
But-
you have to be on the ground and do an audit of the blockade
No.
in order to be able to
I
comment
think
on
you
it?
should at least know what it is, what the territory is, what the situation is in the region. Yes, absolutely.
And the only way
Absolutely.
to do that is to be there in person.
I think that's the best way. It's not the only way, but it's the best way, for sure. For sure.
MMA wise, let me describe it on paper and go watch the fight. There's certain things that you will never captivate. And the fact that people are missing those points, but we need to trust more the document than the conversation. Officially, it's better to win the case, but to understand the experience, you got to see it.
If you have never seen the countries in question, you've never spoken to the people in question, you've never interviewed anyone, you've never gone around, you've never seen the terrain, and so on, and you've used Wikipedia, I'm sorry, no, that's not the same thing.
Okay, well, I've not just used Wikipedia.
I didn't expect them to go there. But as you know, I'm a pattern recognition expert.
Okay, well, I've not just used Wikipedia, but didn't you write a big piece when the war in Ukraine first came out titled something like, I've been to Ukraine and they can win, they can repel the Russians? So you could go there and still get it wrong, right?
No, I was with the Ukrainian armed forces in 2022 when they were retaking territory from the Russians.
Right, the last
Yes.
time they had any advances, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I said I can see how they can win, which would be advances like that, yeah.
You
Sure.
said if we just fund them, or if we just
No,
arm
I
them,
didn't
that
say
they can then
I said,
they can
I
repel
said that
them.
the Ukrainian army was making great successes, which it was when I was with them in the fall of
Okay,
22.
listen, there were lots of
But-
people who went to Iraq and said we'll be greeted as liberators and
I
it'll be
know,
paid
but-
for in oil and democracy will spread through the region. So I don't know. Either take on the arguments or don't, but I don't
But
think
I'm saying,
like...
but your argument's incorrect.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, then present a counter argument to it. But to just tell me I'm not allowed to talk about something
I'm
because I'm
not
not an
saying
expert.
you're not allowed to
okay,
talk
fine. Well,
about
you're
it.
not
I've
an
said
expert, so
repeatedly,
you
you're
shouldn't talk
talking
about
about
it.
it
You
now.
haven't been there. Yeah, I know. But you keep playing this game where it's like the whole opening to this podcast was like the non-experts talking about this is such a problem. Now you're saying because I
don't
haven't been
think-
there, I can't talk about it. Is there a blockade there that's causing economic devastation or not? According to
of
the
all-
World Bank, there is.
And I notice in the comment section people are defending here and there, but something keeps coming up. They're saying that Douglas Murray is losing possibly this debate because he doesn't provide a counter argument. He doesn't want to describe an expert. And it's like, why provide a description of an expert when they use the defense, I'm not an expert? Then I'm like, why don't you explain it? Because whenever you explain, they're going to use your words against you. Then I'm like, no, that's the strategy. If you say you're not an expert, define to me exactly why you're not an expert.
Can I ask you something?
Yes, sir.
Since the war in Israel began, and since the war in Ukraine began, you've had quite a lot of people who are very against both in different ways.
Yes.
Do you think you've had enough people on who are supportive of either war?
I don't know that word enough, if that's a good word.
Let's say enough people who are on the side of Israel instead of wild critics.
Well, I've had a few. I mean, I believe Gaza is on the side of Israel.
For sure.
Jordan is on the side of Israel.
You had Mike Baker, Coleman
yeah.
Hughes.
Yeah. I've had,
Coleman did it for like 20 minutes, so it wasn't why he was here.
no, I mean, none of them. And none of them is why they're here. You know, it's a good question.
Do you think you've tilted one way?
Me personally,
No, just with the guests you've
the
had.
guess, yeah, probably more tilted towards the idea that perhaps the way they've done it is barbaric.
But why do you think that is? Just out of interest. I'm just interested in your selection of guests because you're like the world's number one podcast.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think about it that way. I just think I'd like to talk to this person.
But can I just?
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
it's your
sure,
show. But
sure,
I mean,
sure.
If you're going to interview historians of the conflict or historians in general, why would you get somebody like Ian Carroll or?
Yeah, but Ian Carroll, I didn't bring him on for that purpose. I brought him on because I want to find out, like, how does one get involved in the whole conspiracy theory business? Because his whole thing is just conspiracies.
Sure.
You know?
But do you have any? I mean, there's been a tilt in the conversation, both conversations, in the last couple of years, and it's largely to do with people who have appointed themselves experts, who are not experts.
You mean like Ian? I don't think he appoints himself an expert in anything.
Who's that other dude who thinks he's an expert on Churchill?
Oh, Daryl Cooper does not think he's an expert.
In fact, I think it's everybody else is always calling him an expert, and he's like, oh, I'm just a history
Have you
nerd."
ever absorbed any of his material? Have you ever consumed any of his podcasts or anything like
I
that?
tried.
Yeah?
It's pretty hard to listen to somebody who says, I don't know what I'm talking about, but now I'm going to talk. Or I don't know about this. Or I'm not capable of debating this historian, but I'm going to just tell you what I think.
Yeah, but that's not
I think that's a
exactly
little
that's
bit
not
out of
exactly what
context.
Daryl was saying. I mean, Daryl's point of view, however you feel about this, what Daryl's saying is he doesn't really like doing debates. He likes to do long format stuff where he can really explain his
But
position.
if you throw a lot of shit out there, there's some point at which I'm just raising questions is not a valid thing. You're not raising questions. You're not asking questions. You're telling people something.
Do you think Daryl's doing that?
I think there's a whole bunch of guys doing that.
I think-
Dave is doing that, very obviously. Dave's a comedian, but he's now mainly talking about Israel.
So would I consider myself an expert in history? No, I'm not an expert. I would say I'm just a pattern recognition expert. Because when people have a pattern in their history, the probability is very high they will keep that energy. And that's why I can predict the future sometimes.
It's a war that Hamas started because they shouldn't have invaded their neighbor and they shouldn't have tried to genocide their neighbor. Now, if the war can be prosecuted, could be prosecuted, it was always for two reasons. Always for two reasons. The first one, as stated by the unanimity of Israeli politicians and others, was to retrieve the hostages, who we also haven't spoken about, but there are still hostages in Gaza held for the last 18 months by Hamas, including young Eden Alexander from New Jersey. If Hamas had not stolen the hostages and hidden them in their tunnels and hidden them in civilian homes, this war would have all been different. If they had have given them back, and they could give them back tomorrow, it would all be different. But they didn't. They decided to do what they did on the 7th and to hold on to the 250-odd hostages as it was at the beginning, from the beginning. The second reason why the war is still being prosecuted is because of the stated aim to destroy Hamas, which is the stated aim of the Israelis. Neither of these things is remotely easy, okay? And just from a point of humility, I think, on everyone's side, we should concede none of that is easy. It is not easy to get 250 hostages back when they have been distributed across the Gaza to civilian homes, hidden in tunnels, surrounded by munitions and much more. Hamas is not an actor like Denmark. Its backers don't behave the way that our governments do in the West. They have a totally different time scale that they think along. They have a totally different scale of values as well. The taunts of Hezbollah's leadership, of Hamas's leadership, of their backers in Tehran are annihilationist to their core. But at any point in the last 18 months, the Qataris, for instance, or the Iranians, the Iranian Revolutionary Government, or the Turkish government or others, could have put their pressure on Hamas to return the hostages who are still being held in captivity, and everything would be different.
People respect their brothers more, generally. They could have done something about it. Oh, that explains the hospital bombings and foreign aid trucks blown to Kingdom Come. Douglas Murray is likely a secret Jew or controlled by the Jews, and there's a lot of ways to do that. I'm like, there's nothing you can do right. Even if he might be right, you're still wrong.
No. As I'm sure you know, the way in which Hamas built up the structure of the Gaza throughout the 18 years that they had was precisely to flout and use every law of war against the Israelis. Every army in a conflict has certain rules of war that you're meant to abide by. One of the most obvious is that you are identified as being a combatant, not as a civilian. Okay? Another is you don't put weapons in civilian houses and civilian buildings. You do not fire from houses of worship, rockets. You do not launch attacks from hospitals. You do not keep detention facilities where you can torture and disappear people inside hospitals and other medical facilities. All of these laws of war are the laws that Hamas breaks every minute of every day by their actions. So if you want to get the hostages back, and if you want to destroy Hamas, when you're fighting against a force which does not only not follow the rules of war, but uses your following of the rules of the laws of war against you, at least concede this is a highly specific and complex military operation. And if you have, or anyone else has, and I say this genuinely, a better way to get back the hostages and to destroy Hamas, I at any rate am all ears.
I've asked people that are supportive of Palestine, and most of them say, we cannot solve this because Israel has hostages, and the only way they can defend themselves is by fighting those raids, by shooting missiles back, and hiding their weapons between civilians. They don't agree 100%, but they say it's the only way they know how they can fight back. But we still need to support them because Israel is the bad guy. And I'm like, with that mindset, I don't think you're going to find even a two-state solution, because your solution seems like you're always going to fight.
Don't get me wrong, makosa kita bong. Buta fire na mi blonde, kush hash, purple skunk, criollo, colombici, jam jam, durloqueta, verdetta, welcome.